up to chapter 8, and just to we're talking about the politics of Purim, the politics and the intrigue behind the Megillah, the use of power, and the use of unapparent power that some of the women in the story have, and we're about to see the final blow given by Esther, seemingly the powerless, to the very most powerful man in the world, to Haman. And this is we're going to look at chapter 8 and how Esther actually uses the power that still remains in Ahasuerus's hand to remove Haman from his power and to bring him over to defeat him in ways that she didn't even know were possible. So let's jump right into the chapter 8. If you have Tanakh, it's better. And if not, I do have a translation over here so that we can look at the shared screen. So last week we spoke about Haman's downfall that happened in the night, that Ahasuerus was up all night, tossing and turning. It could be because Esther had left him with so many unanswered questions. It could be because that Esther was really worried about what was happening inside his own cabinet and inside with Haman. And all of a sudden, he hears about Mordechai, and he has the perfect solution of someone who's within his court that's really in favor of him. And he finds out about Mordechai, and he's very eager. Ahasuerus is very eager to push him up. Haman comes and requests to kill Mordechai, impaling him on a stake that is 50 meters high, which is about 7 stories high. And it was definitely something that Haman wanted to do. And we read in chapter 7 how Haman was overturned, and even his second chapter in chapter 7, the last verse in chapter 7 really emphasizes the weak position that Haman is in. And it reads that he was hurried off to the meal, to the feast that Esther prepares. They're still speaking with him. And the eunuchs of the king get to him, and they quickly bring Haman to the party that Esther had made. And that is the last scene. There we're at the party, the second party, in which Esther had promised to which Esther had promised to reveal the wish to the queen. So now, on the second day, the second feast, we're still within about the first month of Haman's rule. We're on the second or third day of Pesach, according to the way things are going, or it could be Chol Hamoed Pesach. This is when the main part of the Esther story, the main drama, occurs on Pesach, and it's really called this is the period of redemption, the period of salvation. And really, Pesach is when Haman gets defeated and Paro gets defeated. So now on the second day, the king again asks Esther at the wine feast, "What is your wish, Queen Esther? It shall be granted to you. What is your request, even to half the kingdom, and it shall be fulfilled." We see Ahasuerus again repeating this very magnanimous way of speaking, very Eastern way of speaking. And there's a rule when we're reading Tanakh. When we read Tanakh and there's a repetition, we always have to ask ourselves, why is this repetition here? What is it coming to teach us? And to have our ears really peeled to hear for differences in the repetition. Right now, it's not different. But we're going to see in the next chapter, there's a difference, and that's why the Megillah is setting us up for that difference that comes in the next chapter. But here it is the magnanimousness of Ahasuerus to come through again, up to half the kingdom. Queen Esther, she is uh, demure, she's she is with innuendo, but also her whole point is to keep Ahasuerus in suspense. Her whole point in creating the double party separated by an evening is to keep Ahasuerus off his balance. And even when she reveals to him, right, who the what she was, she does it in such a way that she is very hiding everything. First of all, we have this um, formal introduction. She used it before, and she used it again. It still adds to the buildup of suspense in Achashverosh. If your majesty will do me the favor, if it pleases your majesty, let my life granted me as my wish, and my people as my request. So now she doesn't, she right away gets into what Achashverosh is most scared of. He remembers Vashti, and the first thing she mentions is her own life. Her life is in, her life is in jeopardy, and that jeopardy is what Achashverosh is very afraid of. So, uh, so Esther puts her life first, and then the people. Uh, Now, she is so modest in the way she requests this. She is so holding back. Uh, for we have been sold, my people and I, to be destroyed, massacred, and exterminated. Right? These are the terms that were in the original decree. Now, I don't think Ahasuerus is making the connection at all to what Esther is talking about, and I don't think he even knows that there's a people that are slated to be destroyed, massacred, and exterminated down almost a year from when this is occurring. It could be that it was a passing incident that he's not really uh, in the know. He knows about it, but I don't think he really is aware what she's talking about. And we see that from the question that he asked after she reveals to him, and she says also, um, if we were sold as slaves or maidservants, I would have kept silent. But it's not worth to trouble the king with this thing. So now, clearly, for Hashverosh, if she would have been sold as a maidservant, it would also bother him. But she has the ability to hold back again and to say, yeah, I wouldn't bother you, this is not too much. She's very, very modest, very hiding, and it's just all this is also calculated in a way to request as a powerless person on the first glance, the powerless woman queen, although the queen, but really a woman in a very, very patriarchal king society. Nevertheless, she has the power, and she's holding Ahasuerus, knowing exactly what points to press, what pressure points to press, and that is his memory of what happened with his first wife, with Vashti. And her argument basically is, if I were only sold as a maidservant, that would be enough, but being murdered is too far. She doesn't want to trouble the king, and she is, but really every one of her actions are calculated to agitate the king, to create a kind of furious delirium, is to drive him insane, basically. And that's what she succeeds in doing. She drives him crazy in that in suspense and in waiting to hear what's happening. So she is really setting up the king, making him lose his cool, and she realizes her power. She uses it not in a direct confrontation, the way Vashti did. See, Vashti also realized her power, but she went about it the wrong way. She realized her power, and she used it to go against the king, like a head-on-head confrontation. Esther realizes her power, but she uses it in a way that is not a head-to-head confrontation, but in a very, very sly, I would say clever way of really holding it in the background. And she really is expressing herself as a good wife should in that society, as concerned for the welfare of the king. And it's this is where this is Esther's genius. Okay, so now Esther has set this up. Esther has really got Hashrosh where she wants him, and Hashrosh is obviously furious. Uh, the next verses I'm going to read in Hebrew and in English, because you have the English in front of you. I want to stress some of the words over here. Vayomer HaMelech Achashverosh, Vayomer leEsther HaMalka. So you have these two words, Vayomer, twice. It's a question. Could have been much more laconically said, Vayomer HaMelech Achashverosh leEsther. But it's Vayomer. Vayomer, I think it's trying to get us into his agitated state. It's not normal speech, but agitated speech. Mihu zeh ve'ezehu, asher mela'ol libo la'asot ken. Again, this double language is really indicative. Sorry, I forgot to share it. This double language is really, so you have a Vayomer twice, and this this much more laconically. Mihu zevezehu is a double. Hashem mila'ol libo, that has filled his heart. I mean, it's really, he can't imagine anyone that would want to kill the queen after what the history was with Vashti, and he can't. And anyone that would be that way, he would, clearly he has taken his life in his hands. So now Esther, even as she's revealing, she's delaying again. She's using that tactic again. And this is, she is trying to set, when she reveals even she says the word Haman, the name of Haman, she doesn't go right out and say it. First, she sets up the characterization of Haman. Ish tsar ve'oyev. A general statement. She doesn't say Tzoreh Yehudim. She just says an enemy. Now, right now, this is like the prime example of what Lashon Hara does, but in this case, obviously, it's being used for a purpose. It sets up the prism, or the lens in which the other person views everything which the person, the listener, is now going to view everything that's said. So Esther, before mentioning the name Haman, and if she would mention it outright, possibly the king would poo-poo her and say, "Oh, the Haman, sure," but she's already gotten the king in such a fury, and she already sets up. This is an enemy. This is a terror. He's a terrible person. Who is that person? Haman. And very, very cleverly setting up the king to immediately accept her characterization of Haman. And Haman reacts immediately. Haman nivat, he's cringed. He's like kicked. Milifnei HaMelech ve'hamalka. והמלך קם בחמתו ובשתי היין אל גינת המיטה. The king, what does the king do? It's not a rational response at this point. The king is acting. He has realized that he's losing control of the situation. The man that he fired all his cabinet and put trust in one man because he couldn't trust after Bigtan Teresh tried to assassinate him. His bodyguard tried to assassinate him. The king switches the whole structure of the Persian society. There's going to be one person he's relying on. Now it turns out that this person himself is trying to do harm to him. Esther had already set up the Haman as a person for whom the king should be jealous of. by inviting only him to the parties. Uh, Haman's pride itself and his desire, his impatience and impulsiveness to wanting to kill Mordechai was another thing that, and his suggestion about what should be done to the person that the king wants to honor, is showing that he wants to usurp the throne. He is thinking himself anyway that he has all this power, that he's probably going to take over the throne, and his suggestion to the king about how to honor the person that honored that saved the king shows that he wants to take over the power, and now this is the last straw. This is the last straw that he wants to kill the queen. But killing the queen, so this Hashalosh is out of control, and he needs to leave the room. The events have spun out of his hands, and he's really looking to calm himself down. Now, notice the words, Amad levakesh al nafsho be'eser malka. Haman is standing, he stood to request for his life, because he knows that he's in big trouble. And he sees that the king has been resolved to destroy him, to finish him off. And although the king hasn't said anything, the king said, the king hasn't said anything in response to Esther, but he leaves the room. We don't know what is going to happen. The king has to sort this all out. Ahasuerus has to sort this all out, but Esther didn't request that Haman be killed. And here, Haman starts to plead his case to Esther, and we can just imagine what he was saying in his defense. It could be that he had no idea that Esther was a Jew. It could be that okay, I'll kill all the Jews, but I'll leave you. And all these things, we don't know what the words that he said. We can imagine what Haman, anyone in his situation, how they would plead. And Esther, how they would plead with Esther. And Esther obviously was not going to respond to it. We don't know what her response is, but we do know that Haman first was standing, and then he was bowing down to her on her lounge. So he's bowing down to her on her lounge. Why? Apparently because the Midrash says that an angel came and pushed him down, that he'd be looking like he's bowing down. But obviously, taking a Peshat approach, he's standing and then he bows down because he is prostrating himself, requesting Esther's mercy. And it must be that he was not successful in his first attempt as he was standing, and he's making a second attempt to press his case with Esther. And okay, so now the king comes back, and we see Haman nofel al hamita asher Esther alea, vayomer hamelech hagam לכבוש את המלכה עמי בבית. Ahasuerus is not talking to anyone at this point. He's just expressing his surprise. It could be even that he's talking to himself. And לכבוש את המלכה עמי בבית is really saying to conquer. It's they translate it over here to ravish the queen. But I think the word lichvosh is relevant also. It shows that he's afraid of being conquered by himself by Haman, and the word imi is also ambiguous. It could be taken together in front of me, right? Or it could also be taken as with me, where we see Ahasuerus, and I like that second explanation as well, that the king is very suspicious of Haman, and he that he sees Haman as wanting to not only take over, conquer the queen, but also lichvosh, to conquer him, to take over power. And this is where his paranoia of Haman, which has basis, takes into full play. הדבר יצא מפי המלך, בני המן חפו, his face was fallen, covered, he knows he's out. At this point, we have a seemingly side character that comes into play, and he's a character that we know before, is mentioned at the outset of the book. If we go back to the first chapter of Megillat Esther, and we see that he's one of the men listed that listed of the king's counselors. Hold on a second, let's get the exact source.
Pasuk Yud, first chapter.
Pasuk Yud. Yeah. So yes, Bizita Harvona, Bigta Vagrakta. This is the thank you, Owen. So we have here the Harvona is mentioned, and he's been out of the limelight for the whole time. Where is Harvona this whole story? We don't know. Harvona is very silent, but this is part of the intrigue of the court, the king's court. Harvona is not going to take a side. Harvona is not for the Jews. He's not against the Jews. He's opportunistic. Harvona, when he sees Haman is in power, he's going to lay low. He's going to do what he has to do, as it gives you a good feeling of what goes on within the court. You have this king, very powerful king, and he has a very powerful second in command, and therefore it is for Harvona's opportune for his best interest to lay low, and he's going to see which way the wind is blowing. And once he realizes that Haman is finished, he does have an interest in getting rid of Haman. He does have an interest because Haman is very powerful. Haman is very proud and haughty, and makes sure everyone does not have a voice. And maybe, just maybe, Harvona himself is thinking, if I move him out of the way and I give the king good advice about what he should do, so then I'll be the one to take over from Haman. This will be going within Harvona's mind, and that's why all of a sudden he pipes up. ויאמר חרבונה, אחד מן הסריסים לפני המלך, גם הנה העץ אשר עשה המן למרדכי, אשר דיבר טוב על המלך. Here's the tree, here's that stake that is standing in Haman's house, 50 feet, that was made for Mordechai, the man whose words saved the king. So now, Harvona doesn't say what to do with that. He just points out another, another nail in Haman's coffin, so to speak, by saying that what does Harvona do? What is so cunning about what he does? It's really cunning. He takes two facts that are not connected, and he says them in one sentence. What are the two facts? Mordechai spoke good about the king. Mordechai saved the king's life. Is that a fact? That's a fact. What's the second fact? Second fact is Haman wants to kill him and made a 50 cubit high stake to do this. So now, anyone hearing these two facts in one sentence, like Ahasuerus did, obviously is going to say that they're connected. And that's exactly what Harvona wanted to achieve. That Ahasuerus would say, Haman wants to kill the man that saved me, and he wants to hang him up 50 cubits high, 7 stories high, so that everyone can see it. And maybe for the first time in the Megillat Esther, Ahasuerus makes a decision, and it's based on Harvona's intervention, but he still makes a decision. Tiluhu alav, hang him on it, hang him up on that very stake that he wanted to use to kill Mordechai. ויתלו את המן על העץ אשר הכין למרדכי, וחמת המלך שככה, the king's anger was subsided. Now, we might say, well, that's the end of the story. The evil Haman is taken out of power, and that's the end of the story. But it's not the end of the story, and it's not the end of the story because the king really doesn't care about Esther's people. The king was scared about Esther, and he got rid of the person who was threatening her, and that was going to kill her, and that's enough for the king. So now we are taken into the next chapter with Ahasuerus giving Mordechai the power, and that's he gets the property of Haman. The Megillah calls already Tzorei Yehudim, the enemy of the Jews. It could be that maybe Ahasuerus even mentioned that possibly, but I'm not sure. But already Ahasuerus is thinking about the connection to Mordechai. He knows Mordechai is a Jew, and then Mordechai came, presented to the king, gives him his ring, and he gave it to Mordechai, and instead put Mordechai in charge of Haman's property. Now, seemingly this is all good, and everything is taken care of, but it's not. And even though Haman is gone, the decree remains, and the decree is a rough one. I just want to say, before going back to the last point that we made, Esther, I don't know if Esther even thought in her wildest imaginations that Haman would be executed. I don't think that was her plan. I think that is part of the hashgacha that happened in the setting up, relying on Hashem, and that extra bonus of Haman being not only deposed but executed was something that was out of the plan. And then going further, that Mordechai should replace Haman was a big step. Esther is now powerful enough she feels the power and the sway that she holds over Ahasuerus, and she's able to request that Mordechai be put in place in Haman's place. Now, Esther still has probably Esther and Mordechai probably speak about, now what are we going to do about these decrees? They're still in force, and we have to do something about those decrees. And they probably felt that the only hope is for Ahasuerus to cancel the decree, and that's where they go again to Esther, and they request to cancel the decree. But let's see what happens over here and how it's spoken about, because I mentioned before we want to look at where things are different, repetitions are different, and we see Esther coming in front of the king again in verse 3, and it says, Esther spoke to the king again, falling at his feet and weeping, beseeching him to avert the evil plot by Haman the Agagi against the Jews. And we see this is again happening. She's risking her life again because she wasn't summoned to the king's court, and we see that she's risking her life for the very fact that the king extends his scepter to Esther, and Esther rises up. Now, what did the king say what did Ahasuerus say in the previous cases? He would say, you can have up to half the kingdom. The first time she appears in the court unsummoned, he's very magnanimous. Every other time, he's very magnanimous. Ironically, this time, when she has the power and she has the position, he just extends the scepter and doesn't say anything. This is very telling about Now, what's going on in Ahasuerus? Maybe he's a little bit afraid of Esther's new power and what he might be forced to do. It could be that he's not so willing to be so magnanimous any longer when she really has something to request, and that is where why you have this difference in the way it's being expressed, as opposed to the other times when Esther appears in front of Ahasuerus. And she again uses the formula of the three preludes to the request. If it please your majesty, and if I won your favor, I propose his right to your majesty, and I am pleasing to you. She adds another aspect to it. Let dispatches be written countermanding, going against those which were written by Haman, son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, without that his plot to annihilate the Jews. For how can I bear to see the disaster which will befall my people, and how can I bear to see the destruction of my kindred? Up to this point, further at the party, her request was based on Paro's interest. Over here, the request is really based on his interest as well, but how can I see this happen? Ahasuerus is not so interested in the Jews. He doesn't care so much, but he does care about Esther. And now Esther is trying to parlay that concern that he has for her into I won't be able to stand it if my people are killed. And therefore, it is about using the relationship that she has with him to get him to act. Ahasuerus is not so eager to act in this regard, and he starts listing all the things that he has done for Esther and the Jews, as if that was his motivation. So he says, "I gave Haman's property to Esther, and he's been impaled on the stake for scheming against the Jews." Now, Ahasuerus says, I killed him because he was scheming against the Jews. That's what it comes out from this. But that's not the reason he killed him. He killed him because he was afraid of Haman taking over his position as king, and that's the reason he killed him. But now, as in politics, you can make the narrative any way you want, and he's kind of saying to Esther, I already did a lot for the Jews. I'm not doing this. And you may further write with regard to the Jews as you see fit, write it in the king's name and seal it with the king's signature, for an edict that has been written in the king's name and sealed with the king may not be revoked. So here we see, first of all, now this is a throwback to the beginning of Megillat Esther, because as we said earlier, as we said a couple of weeks ago, that Vashti was not killed. Vashti was still alive, and if the king missed her so much, he could have just as well revoked that decree that he made to punish Vashti, to remove her to depose her. But the king doesn't have that power, and the king is not willing to overturn the rulings, the ways that his government functions. And when you go back and amend something that you just passed a couple of days ago, you look kind of foolish. And even Ahasuerus, that is not, that we see that he is not so afraid of looking foolish in previous situations. This is pretty bad. So Ahasuerus is not wanting to look foolish. So he hides behind the law of Paras Umadai, that this can't be revoked. So Haman was only in power for about a month, and the king scribe was summoned at this time, the 23rd day of the third month, that is the month of Sivan. So this happens in Pesach time that Haman is killed. 2 months go by, and this, we might not always pay attention to the time frame over here, but 2 months go by as we move closer to the deadline of when the decree for all the anti-Semite, all the Jew haters in the vast empire of Ahasuerus to band together to kill the Jews. And these 2 months were spent in maybe planning and waiting how they're going to get this decree canceled. Obviously, Esther and Mordechai don't want to fight. They don't want to have a situation. They prefer to have the decree canceled, and they prefer that because if the decree is not canceled, so then they have a lot of work to do to get the Jews up to snuff to fight against the Jew haters that there were many within the kingdom. So they do send out the letters throughout the whole country, and we see the same type of organization and the administration that we saw at the beginning, and also in the middle. The beginning with the decree against Vashti, the middle with the decree of Haman, and now we see the third decree going out that gives the Jews the right to defend themselves, and that's and what is that? What is that right? And we see it in the thing in the content of the proclamation. That's verse 11. The king has ordered the Jews of every city to assemble and fight for their lives. If any people of Providence attacks them, they may destroy, massacre, exterminate its armed force together with women and children and plunder their possessions. Was giving the Jews the exact same right that was in the first. It was in the first decree of Haman, and on a single day in all the provinces daily on the 13th day of the 12th month, that is the month of Adar. So now it's 9 months away, but still it's on the same exact day that Haman's decree went out. The text of the document was to be issued as a law in every single province. It was to be publicly displayed to all the peoples. The Jews would be ready for this to avenge themselves on their enemies. And the couriers mounted on royal steeds, went out in urgent haste at the king's command, and the decree was proclaimed in the fortress Shushan. But just because the decree has a neutralizing decree doesn't mean this is going to be successful. And we have to see what Mordechai does, his strategy, Mordechai's strategy to organize the Jews, to get them ready for this fateful day, because it still can mean that Jews will be killed. Mordechai has to be responsible for all the Jews. He couldn't get the decree canceled. He couldn't, that would have been the best situation. But now, okay, maybe in Shushan, maybe with him, maybe with certain people, the Jews will win. But he's really concerned that the leader is about all the Jews. In next week's Shiur, we're going to look at the steps that Mordechai and Esther do to project power, to project the strength that maybe they don't have so much of it, but they're going to project a lot of strength, and it's going to sway. It's really actually a political campaign, to show that we're going to win. It's like sometimes boxers will do before a fight. They'll taunt each other. They'll trash talk. You might have teams. So not the teams, leading up to a championship game. They might put the other team down. In some sports, they do that. Here, Mordechai and Esther carry out a political campaign to make sure that every single last Jew will be safe and will not be killed, and that B'ezrat Hashem will look at next week. If anyone would like to ask any questions or have any comments, please feel free. I can't hear you.
Yeah, I have a comment.
Go ahead, Moe.
Just regarding the that delay between when the events, when Haman getting hanged, and when they actually send out the messages, that's something I never paid attention to before. But I think the date is interesting. The 23rd of Sivan is when they're sent. That's right around my daughter's birthday. And just looking at the calendar, I realized Vayishlach Sifarim. So that generally falls out in the week that we read Parashat Shelach. The
Ah,
date that they sent out the messages is the day of Shelach. So
that is very. I never noticed that.
yeah, neither did I, but maybe there's something to it. And basically the sending out the messages is basically saying there's going to be a war and the Jews are going to fight. And Parashat Shelach, they were afraid to fight. They were afraid. Do with it what you.
Okay.
Something to think about.
Yeah, it is something to think about. It's the annual reading of the Torah is something that is Babylonian, and it could be that but it could be that it was already in place by this time because we are in Galut Bavel, so it's very likely that it existed, at least for the people of in Chutz La'aretz. So it could be that they were reading Parashat Shelach as they said. And they said that it was a Bavel thing, and it existed in the first at the end of the first temple. So this could be, and we're talking about Paras, which is the kingdom that came in that took over Babel. So it could be that it is Parashat Shelach. So who knows? Who knows?
Yes.
And the messengers like the Meraglim, but in a positive way, and now they're going to fight. Great, never thought of it, and I appreciate the comment. Okay, next week we'll get into the campaign, the political campaign that Esther and Mordechai do to ensure a complete and total victory for the Jewish people by projecting power. That's next week. Thank you all for joining.